When you think about the legends of Formula One, there are several names that stand out. Lewis Hamilton, Prost, Jim Clark, Niki Lauda, and Fangio, to name but a few. But few names are more synonymous than that of Senna. He was revered by many, but what made him be held in such high regard by drivers and fans alike? Let's find out. Hailing from Sao Paulo in Brazil, Senna was born in 1960 to wealthy parents. Early on, he took an interest in cars and motorsport. He had learned to drive around his family farm by the age of 7, even going so far as to learn to change gears without using the clutch. He was karting at a young age using a kart built by his father, using a lawnmower engine for power. By the age of 13, he won the South American Kart Championship, and from here he went on to enter the Karting World Championship many times, taking second place in 1979 and 1980. This success set the stage for what would become a meteoric rise in the world of motorsport. Karting was more than just a stepping stone for Senna. It was here where he developed many of the skills that would take him through his career. The competition, coupled with the technical precision required in karting, laid the foundation for Senna's driving, aggressive style, and willingness to do whatever it took to win. 1981 saw Senna move up to single-seater racing. He entered and subsequently won Formula Ford F1 600, both British and European Formula 4 championships, as well as the British Formula 3 championship consecutively, taking 46 wins out of 66 races he entered. This immense success in a short period propelled Senna into Formula 1. Initially testing with several teams in 1983, including Williams and McLaren, eventually making his debut with the Toleman team in 1984. The Toleman car that he made his debut in was largely uncompetitive. Despite this, Senna managed to turn heads with his performance at the Monaco Grand Prix that year. In the torrential rain that plagued the race, he demonstrated an almost ethereal ability to control his car in the worsening conditions. He initially qualified in 13th place on the grid and advanced to second before the race was controversially stopped. Senna was rapidly catching the lead car by over 4 seconds a lap. However, he had to settle for second place once the race was prematurely ended. He was naturally furious about this, feeling that his win had been taken away from him. This performance cemented Senna's reputation as a driver of exceptional skill, particularly in wet conditions. Senna impressed further, taking 2 additional podiums and scoring 13 points across the season to put an end to what was an outstanding rookie year. Senna's breakthrough came in 1985 when he joined the Lotus team. Over the next 3 seasons, he secured his maiden victory, the first of many, and established himself as one of the sport's leading drivers. However, it wasn't until he made the switch to McLaren in 1988 that truly marked the beginning of his dominance in Formula 1. Paired with Prost, a driver of equal caliber but contrasting style, Senna engaged in one of the most intense rivalries in the history of the sport. Prost, known as the Professor due to his intelligent approach to racing, was already a double world champion by this point, and his pairing with Senna gave McLaren easily the strongest and most competitive driver lineup on the grid. This pairing, coupled with the McLaren Honda MP44 being an utterly dominant machine, saw the duo win 15 of the 16 races. This 93.8% win rate was only recently beaten in 2023 by Red Bull Racing, with 21 wins out of the 22 held that year. 1988 eventually saw Senna coming out on top, taking his first Drivers' Championship. Over the entire year, Prost actually scored more points than Senna, 105 to 94 respectively. However, at the time, only the best 11 results of the season were counted, which led to Senna taking the championship by 3 points. During their time at McLaren, Senna and Prost developed an intense rivalry. It wasn't just about two drivers competing for supremacy. Their personalities, philosophies, and approach to racing were entirely at odds with one another. Prost was methodical, strategic, and calculating. In contrast, Senna was passionate, instinctive, and more often than not, aggressive. This difference in approach led to several on-track confrontations, most notably during the 1989 and 1990 seasons. 1989 was a similar story for McLaren. The team took 10 wins over the season, with Senna standing on the top step of the podium on 6 occasions to Prost's 4. Ultimately though, Prost took the title due to suffering fewer issues with the car and being more consistent with his results. The rivalry between the two intensified over the year. Tensions initially rose at the San Marino Grand Prix, with Senna overtaking Prost at the start. This was something Prost later claimed violated a pre-race agreement between the two, though Senna denied that no such agreement had ever existed. Their rivalry extended beyond the bounds of the track and exploded out into the media and the paddock. Prost often criticised Senna's aggressive driving style, accusing him of taking unnecessary risks that endangered both himself and others. This was often a fair criticism. Senna was well known for putting a driver he was racing against in the position where they had to yield or crash. Senna believed that racing was about pushing the limits, and his aggressive approach reflected his determination to win. If you're enjoying the video, please consider giving it a like and hitting the subscribe button to see more F1 content like this. The 1989 season culminated in a controversial incident at the Japanese Grand Prix, where Prost and Senna collided. Senna needed to win the race in order to keep the championship alive. Knowing this, on lap 46, Senna made a move down the inside at the final chicane. They ended up tangling and rolling into the runoff just ahead of the corner, leaving both McLarens at a standstill. Prost abandoned his car and headed to the paddock. Senna, however, motioned for marshals to push-start his car to get it going again. They complied with this, and after a pit stop to repair his damaged wing, went on to win the race. Once the race had completed, stewards looking at the various incidents of the race concluded that Senna was to be disqualified for receiving the push start, cutting the chicane and crossing into the pit lane in an unsafe manner. This handed the championship to Prost due to Senna's disqualification from the event. At the end of the 1989 season, Prost made the decision to move to Ferrari to get away from the now incredibly toxic relationship at McLaren. Despite this, their rivalry continued in 1990, with both drivers competing for the championship. The Brazilian's phenomenal form continued, taking 10 pole positions out of the 16 races and winning 6. Prost took 5 wins over the season, and heading into race 15 of the season in Japan, Senna led the championship by 9 points. Despite qualifying on the pole, Senna argued that he was starting on the dirty side of the track and that Prost, who qualified second, would therefore still have the advantage. He initially lobbied to have the pole position side swapped to maintain his advantage. When this was denied, he decided to end the race at the start, securing himself the Drivers' Championship. As he predicted, the Frenchman had the advantage and pulled ahead before the first corner. Senna made an ambitious move up the inside, which resulted in the two heading straight for the gravel trap. He was now a 2-time world champion. After the race, he attempted to justify what was a very obviously premeditated move with the famous and often misquoted line,
"And if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver."
Sometime later, he eventually admitted that he wasn't going for a gap at all, but intentionally put himself in a position where he would either come out of turn 1 in first place or not at all. The following year saw Senna take his third driver's title, and this time in a much cleaner fashion. Prost, only managing to come 5th in the standings, suffered with a car that was far down on power compared to the rest of the grid. As a result of this, Nigel Mansell in the Williams was Senna's closest rival throughout 1991. 1992 and 93 saw a pair of Williams championships with Nigel Mansell and the returning Prost, who had been paid off by Ferrari after the 91 season, both taking a championship each. Prost retired after the 1993 season, paving the way for Senna to join the now dominant Williams team alongside Damon Hill. Various rule changes over the winter break, predominantly the banning of active suspension, traction control and ABS, had a profound effect on the new Williams FW16. All three being features that contributed to the dominance of the team over the previous 2 years. Despite this, Senna remained close to Michael Schumacher throughout the early races, taking pole positions in the opening 3. This third race, the San Marino Grand Prix, taking place at Imola, ended up being Senna's last. The weekend had already been struck by tragedy early on. Roland Ratzenberger, driving for Simtek, crashed in qualifying and was unfortunately killed. This understandably left many drivers shaken and left a black cloud over the event. Nevertheless, Senna took his third pole position of the season and on Sunday's race led the lead at the start. On lap 7, while approaching Tamburello, one of the highest speed corners on the track, Senna's Williams went off and hit the barrier at 200 km/h. The collision broke the front right suspension, with a section of it entering the cockpit and piercing Senna's helmet, causing a huge amount of injury. He was rushed to hospital by helicopter, but it was later determined that he had been killed on impact. This was unknown to drivers and fans alike, and as such the race continued, with Michael Schumacher taking the win. It was a somber podium that featured no celebrations. It was one of the darkest days in motorsport for a long time and is often cited as being the blackest day in Formula One history. After his death, Senna received a state funeral in Brazil, with many fans considering it to be a national tragedy. The crowds were astonishing. Over 500,000 people took to the streets in Sao Paulo to mourn the loss. Much of the paddock attended his funeral, though several key personnel from his McLaren days opted to skip it due to being overcome with grief. Senna's legacy is undeniable. His talent, commitment to motorsport and work ethic were unquestionable. Drivers such as Lewis Hamilton still regularly pay tribute to the man, often citing him as one of their heroes and a reason they wanted to get into motorsport. What do you think of Senna? Is he the greatest of all time? Or does someone else hold that title? And where do you think his career would have gone had he not been tragically killed in 1994? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching.